The living room is where you make life's most beautiful memories. But your sofa shouldn't be the one remembering them. The new life-resistant, high-performance furniture collection from Ashley is designed to withstand all the spills, slip-ups, and muddy paws that come with the best parts of life. Ashley high-performance sofas and recliners are soft, on-trend, and easy to clean. Shop the high-performance furniture in-store or online at ashley.com. Ashley, for the love of home.
Hey everyone, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call. If you're paying too much for wireless service, you don't have to keep having that nightmare. Consumer Cellular has the same fast, reliable coverage as the leading carriers for up to half the cost. So why keep spending more than you have to? Seriously, wake up and call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single line 1, 5, and 10 gig data plans with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon January 2024.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, is a man with the voice of a drunken angel. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the captain.
It's good to be seen and good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
This week, we are very excited to be featuring Mortal Bloom Hazy IPA by the good folks up at Founders Brewing Company. There is no harsh aftertaste here with Mortal Bloom. This hazy is intense with tropical notes of both pineapple and mango. ABV 6.2%, garage grade 4.25 bottle caps out of 5. And let's give some thanks and praise to our friends that helped us fill up the old garage fridge for this week's set of shows. First up, a shout out to Katie in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
And a big We Like Your Jib goes out to Andy from London, Ontario, Canada.
Next up, a big shout out to Jen in Blues Creek, North Carolina. And last, but certainly not least, we have Jody Harding in Sturgeon County, Alberta, Canada. Everyone we just mentioned, they went to truecrimegarage.com, clicked on the pint glass, and helped us out with the beer fund. And for that, we thank you.
Yeah, BWRUN. If you need more True Crime Garage for your earballs, make sure you subscribe to us on Patreon or Apple subscription. And Colonel, that's enough of the business.
All right, everybody, gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer. Let's talk some true crime.
Don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry what I did to Compton. I couldn't help it. Don't know why I had to stab her. I am so upset about it. I keep getting drunk every night. I can't believe it's just like a big dream. I can't think of being locked up. If I get locked up, I'll kill myself. I'd rather kill myself than get locked up. I'll try not to kill anybody else.
Fire emergency.
Please don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. Kimberly Compton was the first one over at Saint Paul. I don't know what's the matter with me. I'm sick. I'm going to kill myself, I think.
Where are you?
I'm just going to... If somebody dies with a red shirt on, it's me. I killed both people. I'm sorry. I'll never make it to heaven. Oh, yeah. You find me, I just stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing somebody. Yes, please, this is an emergency. Please send a squad to Pierce Butler Road, Molenberg Manufacturing Company, machine shop. Please, there's an ambulance too. There's a girl hurt there.
Can you tell me what happened to her?
Just hurry, she's laying on the ground in the back by the railroad tracks, by the edge. Hurry.
What's the address?
I don't know.
Who are you?
This week's true crime story starts off on December 31st, 1980. We are going to go to one of the big Twin Cities, Saint Paul, Minnesota. It's dark out, and it's quite cold. The Minnesota winters are typically cold, and the wind can feel almost sharp when it hits you. So turn up those collars. It's also New Year's Eve, and there is always a certain level of excitement that comes with this evening as many prepare to hit a stop or two and partake in the festivities leading up to and just after midnight. For some, this night can be quite magical, or at least filled with much anticipation. So on this night, we have a young woman, 20-year-old Karen Potok. She is a University of Stevens Point student. She's walking alone. She has left a New Year's Eve party. Now, this is not such a great idea. It looks like she left the party after getting into some kind of argument with the people that she was attending the party with. Now, I am unsure of where Karen was heading to, but keep in mind, she is actually about 3 hours from where she is living at the time. She's in the big city that night to celebrate the coming holiday and the stroke of midnight. And now, after an argument, she's out walking in the cold by herself. So we can surmise that she did not have a vehicle with her based off of what is about to happen. So maybe she was just going to go and blow off some steam, but in all likelihood, the only people that she knew in the big city of Saint Paul on that night were the people at the party inside of the nightclub that she just walked out of. A man spots the young woman walking alone in the cold and the dark and offers her a ride, or at least an opportunity to get into the vehicle and get out of the cold. Karen accepts the offer. She is picked up. This is near Pierce Butler Road and Syndicate Avenue intersection in Saint Paul, Minnesota. And that was all that the man needed, was simply to get her into his car. Now, she was going to be his. Not too long later, this is approximately about 3 a.m., St. Paul 911 Emergency Services receives a call. The caller's voice was seemingly male, but the voice was in a higher pitch, and the caller sounded like he was shaking. It was obvious to the dispatcher that the male caller likely had either been crying or attempting to disguise his voice, or possibly both. The man was calling to tell them, quote, "There is a girl hurt there. She needs help, and now." The caller described the location of where the girl could be found, asking for an ambulance. The dispatcher asked for details about what had happened to the girl and what's the caller's name. What is the girl's name? But the caller with the very strange voice failed to provide much information beyond what we've already discussed. And again, the dispatcher's asking the caller who he is, and the caller immediately hangs up the phone.
Yeah, because if you're the dispatcher, you're wondering, is this a good Samaritan that came across a victim and is calling for help, or is this the attacker?
Yeah, and on top of that, you want to know as much as you can about the person who is hurt, as described by the caller. You want to know as much about the caller. What's the relationship, like you're saying? Was he the attacker, or is he just trying to help out? But also within that call, Captain, the caller is calling because he's requesting assistance and help for this woman. He refers to her as a girl, but he's slightly vague on where the woman would be found. So part of that is probing the caller for additional information so you can get the ambulance, get the EMTs as close to where this woman can be found as soon as possible. And as we said, he doesn't provide much in the way of detail regarding where she can be found exactly. So emergency services, they're going to race to the general location that was provided to them by this strange caller. With a quick search, they located a woman who was very badly beaten. And without going into too much detail, to describe her as very badly beaten would be a huge understatement. Most of the injuries were to the head and parts of the body, but mostly the head. She was unresponsive when they arrived, but she's still breathing. And she was actually barely breathing, very faint breathing, but she was still alive. So emergency services located what would appear to have been the lifeless body of a young woman. This is near a set of train tracks running near the Malmberg machine shop. So this is today, and I'm sure back then as well, Captain, quite a busy area of Saint Paul. For folks that live there, they will likely know this area. The business is Malmberg Manufacturing. This is a business located on Syndicate Street. This is an area filled with both businesses, but it's also quite industrial as well. So they find her body near these train tracks, near the Malmberg Manufacturing. And I'm only repeating that name because it will play a role, or at least I believe, in this case as we continue going through some of the details here. And it would appear to the police that not only where we found her is going to be important, but they also believe that that's likely where the attack went down, that she was attacked in this same area where we're finding her.
Her wounds are very severe, and so I'm sure there's some evidence, that blood evidence, that this attack happened there.
Yeah, so the man who gave Karen a ride, he drove her to this location. The train tracks are behind this manufacturing business. He attacked her severely. Even though she is still alive, thankfully, when help gets there, she's still alive. There's no way, I'm guessing there's no way that he thought that she was still alive, or maybe he did. And we can get into that as we go as well. But the descriptions I have seen regarding her life-threatening injuries, there's no way that I would have walked away from there thinking she was alive, or responding to the scene thinking that she was alive when attempting to go and help her. Somehow, really only by the grace of God and with the help of some very incredible nurses and doctors at the nearby hospital, and don't forget about those first responders that helped so much as well, this poor woman survives the attack. I'm very happy to report that she is still alive today, but we are talking about a very long recovery from very, very serious injuries. Police, once they are able to speak with Karen, because she's unconscious for quite some time. So eventually, with the assistance of medical staff and really trying to help her, eventually they will be able to interview her. But she's not really able to be much in the way of any help, or able to provide much information to help lead police to her attacker. She doesn't know who he was, can't really give much in the way of details of that evening.
She gets into a car to get a ride from a stranger. So you'd go up, they're pretty close, so she should have got a good look at him, but you don't sit down in somebody's car and just stare at them. You look forward. You don't want to be rude or weird.
The other thing too is, and I'm not trying to put any of this on the victim, because I really believe that the lack of recall that she has here is simply 100% from the injuries. We're talking about severe head trauma here, but it's New Year's Eve, right? So she's maybe be slightly impaired anyway from the drinking.
Yeah.
And we know she was at a party, but I think what you're hoping for here, Captain, is like something that we've talked about and we discuss regularly in these cases, because you and I are both intrigued by the investigation, the manhunt. How do we find who's responsible? What evidence and what strategies can we apply to our investigation to figure out who is the bad guy and how we can take him off of the streets? And so you're very likely, when you sit down with her finally after waiting all of this time, you're going, if she can just give us some kind of description of his vehicle, maybe that will give us and put us on the path to lead police to this attacker who, look, if we're able to catch up with him, he is most certainly going to be charged with attempted murder here. This is far beyond assault.
Yeah, if you're law enforcement, you're sitting there going, okay, we have a severely beaten victim. If I'm law enforcement, I'm going, this is not just assault. To me, this is attempted murder.
Yeah.
But we have our victim. She got into the car with a stranger. Okay, so before the attack happened, do you remember what the car looked like? Again, something that could be difficult for the victim because, like we said, the weather wasn't great. So a lot of times when the weather's not great and you're walking outside, you keep your head down. This is the way it works. So you get in this vehicle, you know that you're probably not going to get a great description of this individual because of the attack. And so then the other question is, okay, can we get anything to identify the vehicle? But is there any other items that we could identify the attacker? You know, that whether that's a beard or a weird necklace or a tattoo, or maybe even a smell or a sound or something that you heard that could help us identify this attacker.
So the way that this plays out, and here's where I would take the investigation, and I'm sure that they probably did every bit of this and beyond. You know, as we said, she does not remember the attack itself and really most of the details leading up to the attack. So now you're left with a couple of scenarios. One being that she lives 3 hours away. She went to the big city for the big party for the big night, New Year's Eve, right?
Yeah.
And she's there with a couple lady friends of hers. So you're probably working this case very quickly going, well, we don't have any of her friends or social circle beyond the people that she traveled with to interview because they're not there. They're not present. She's in town for the night. On top of that, you're working this and probably very quickly going to summarize that neither of the people she was traveling with had any level of involvement. So now you're left with the idea of, okay, what do we got? Well, one of the things we do have is we know that it was after midnight that she's picked up, roughly 1 a.m. So you can go and you can try to interview people that may have been in the general area at the time of when she was picked up, hoping to get that vehicle description. But let's talk about the crime scene. You know, unfortunately, our victim's not able to help out a whole lot with who the attacker was, but also the crime scene was not incredibly helpful as well. At the crime scene, there is little in the way of evidence for police to work with. There's no weapon found and really nothing at all left behind by the attacker. And the victim can't help because of her horrible injuries suffered during the attack. So that case is going to run out of leads real quick.
Well, and like you were saying, she goes there with a group of females, but it's very unlikely because we have the victim saying, I got in the car with a stranger. So it's very unlikely that if somebody had it out for her in her normal life and her normal social circles, that somebody followed her all the way into the city. So law enforcement is dealing with two big hurdles. One, the victim doesn't remember most of what happened that night. And two, we could surmise that it's a stranger on stranger attack.
Shortly after the attack, like we said, there's that call. There's that 911 call. The caller described the location or attempted to describe the location where this hurt girl could be found, that he says that he hurt or that you can easily connect the dots that he probably did hurt her, being that when asked who he is, he hangs up the phone. So now really all you're working with is this 911 call. So you have this 911 call. This is a lead for them to track down. Now they do figure out, Captain, that the call came from a payphone located not terribly far from this crime scene.
Right.
The recording of the male 911 caller with the very strange voice was, I would obviously say that it's him that was the assailant, but of course police would not at the time be in any way to say with 100% certainty that the caller and the attacker were one and the same. But that is your only really lead and true lead at the time.
Again, it becomes complicated for law enforcement because is this somebody that is familiar with the area, or is this somebody that doesn't even live close to this area? You know, let me go far away from my personal location to commit a violent crime. And then I just think there's a lot of questions with this call. Why did the attacker call 911 anyways? You would think that the purpose of the attack was for him to kill her. So why would he want any chance of her to survive? And again, he doesn't know what she will remember and what she won't remember.
Right.
It's almost like a question of, is this guy so remorseful right away that he needs to get her help? And then, is this his real voice, or is this some kind of disguise?
If you take the caller at his word, which it's going to be incredibly difficult to take him at his word, but if you take him at his word, that is what it sounds like to me that his motivation is to get the girl that he just attacked some help. So
Right.
either he's remorseful, like you said, but also it may just be something of saving his own conscience and soul from having a murder on his shoulders rather than this assault, as deadly as it was. But if he can get emergency personnel to her and save her life, then maybe in some selfish way he's going to not feel so bad for what he did. And I want to hone in on something that you were talking about just a second ago with the location. And you're spot on there, because I spent a good deal of time trolling around on some maps of Saint Paul, looking at the location of where she was picked up and the location of where she was found. And to me, being an outsider, I've never been to the Twin Cities, but being an outsider, it looked to me like one wouldn't have to necessarily be familiar with the area or from the area to have chosen this site. If
Right.
I were looking for a secluded location that was somewhat not too far away from where I picked her up, I think anybody could have really found their way to this spot. So really the location of where she's found doesn't, to me, seem to be very helpful for investigators either.
One of the things that we learned from Mindhunter is that they classify these types of killers where they go, well, this guy's organized or disorganized. I feel like there's this strange type of killer. You have like a Ted Bundy type where there's almost no remorse. I have this urge to kill. I'm going to kill at will, not feel too bad about it afterwards. Almost relish in the joy of talking about the crimes or reliving the crimes in my own mind. And then there's other killers, and I would say like Dahmer would be a decent example of somebody that had these urges, knew the urges were bad, and just couldn't control the urges. And so then when the crime took place, I think it was a double-edged sword where there's probably a part of him that enjoyed reliving the fantasy of the killing, and there was a part of him that the reliving of the killing actually haunted him. Does any of that make any sense to you?
Well, it makes sense in that I've reviewed the same information. I don't, they call it psycho for a reason.
Right.
And so it's hard for us normal guys to really kind of dissect these individuals, even if we're talking about one single attack here, but it's weird, right? Like I respect the organized and disorganized classification of attackers, killers, serial killers. But keep in mind, eventually Douglas comes out with the idea, well, that there's a mixed offender that is both organized and disorganized. So that kind of turns that idea on its head. But the other thing, you mentioned Dahmer, you mentioned Ted Bundy. Both of those individuals started off very organized. And then later, because they killed for so long undetected, in Bundy's case specifically, he becomes a frenzy killer.
Yeah.
After a good period of time. And a frenzy killer by nature is disorganized. He's spiraling completely out of control. And like Dahmer said, after his second murder, which he doesn't even really recall killing the man, right? He wakes up and finds the body. So that, in a sense, is disorganized. But he says, well, that's when I just decided that I'm just going to go for it. Right. I felt remorse for the first two killings that I did. But after this, I know who I am, and I'm going to continue to do this. And so he devolves into a disorganized killer with people escaping from his apartment, and then like we talked about last week with Robert Pickton.
Yeah.
His own words to the informant, to the cop, undercover cop that they put in a jail cell next to him or with him while he awaits trial. He tells the cop, well, I killed 49 and I would have got to 50, but I got sloppy at the end. So I really think that all of these guys on a long enough timeline, no matter how organized they are, they become disorganized. The one exception would be somebody like a BTK, but also keep in mind, he really, even though he was still unidentified and not apprehended at the time, he really had stopped killing essentially at that point. So maybe he never worked himself to the point of becoming disorganized.
Well, I think that was part of the fetish for him, was the planning and the organization, getting all the items ready that he was going to take and not take, and surveillance the house. And I think that's part of what he enjoyed about the whole process. But I think you bring up a good point. I don't know. I guess that's my question is, we have some of these killers that seem like they have no remorse at all. And then I would argue, like with Dahmer, it wasn't so much of like, well, I'm just going to kill people and not feel bad about it. I think it was more a sense of, I'm tired of fighting the urge off. So when I have the urge, I'm just going to let it happen. But I still think there was probably some remorse there for him. But I think that's, like you said, there's different levels of psycho. But I think that's very fascinating.
You're absolutely right. And that is one thing that makes Dahmer, I wouldn't say one of a kind, but certainly unique.
Yeah.
Is that the pleasure, sorry for these terms, but I mean, we're trying to define some of this and look at these and examine some of this.
We're all adults here.
The pleasure of killing for Dahmer far outweighed the sadness and remorse that it brought him.
Right. And that's what I think is so fascinating. And they all talk about it. Almost all of them talk about it. There's some kind of sensation. There's some kind of urge that they feel.
Well, and in this case that we're talking about here today, from New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, 1980 to 1981, with this particular attacker, with what little information we have to go on, I would say in this instance, we're probably talking about somebody that is fairly organized just by reviewing what limited information we have, right? Like, so our victim here, Karen, she was not beat with hands and fist.
Right.
She was beat with an object, and it was likely a tire iron or crowbar, something of that nature, a metal object, because her head was split open. The brain was exposed when the responders arrived on the scene. And so that means that this attacker had the weapon already with him. So that falls immediately into the organized killer category. And the other thing too is the call comes in at roughly 3 a.m. Remember, she's picked up at roughly 1.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of time. What I'm getting at here is that he picked her up, and once she was in the car, it looks to me like he went pretty quickly to this location and started attacking her. So that shows some level of planning or forethought in advance.
Yeah, because remember the Lauren Spurrier case, and they picked up a guy, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be blurry on some of these details, but when they were studying the surveillance tapes and trying to figure out what happened to Lauren Spurrier, they found a guy that he was convicted of many crimes before, and he was just driving around in a van all night, and they see his
night
van
after night.
They see his van on surveillance, and then when they pick him up and go, what are you doing? And he's like, this is one of the things I do, and I'm not the only person out there doing that, looking for opportunities. Maybe they don't take the opportunity, but they're driving around looking for that opportunity. So like you said, if this guy's familiar with the location, this guy could be driving this location every night for a month. So now he knows once I do get a victim in my car, I know of several places I could take them. So like you said there, I think that's, again, a level, like you said, of organization. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you find yourself on social media comparing your life to others? Your buddy got a new car. Your other buddy just took a vacation. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. The grass isn't always greener on the other side, though. The grass is greener where you water it. So water your life with BetterHelp. It might look like your friends have it all together on their Instagram. In reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. That's why I love BetterHelp. They are helping me live my best life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. And that's what I love about it. BetterHelp is flexible with my schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/garage today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/garage. This show is proudly sponsored by BetterHelp.
Laundry on Spin Cycle? Give Golden Nugget Online Casino a spin. With hundreds of exciting games, Golden Nugget lets you live it up in your downtime. Discover good fortune on games like Fortune Coin, available anywhere Golden Nugget Online Casino is. Instead of letting boredom hit, may your slots hit instead. Right now, new players can get $50 instantly in casino credits with just a $5 deposit. And all players can play for a share of over $1 million in weekly rewards. Sign up with code GARAGE and make any moment golden. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. Please play responsibly. 21 plus. Physically present in Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia only. Void in Ontario. One per new customer. Minimum $5 deposit. Max $50 issued in non-withdrawable casino credits that expire in 168 hours. See goldennuggetcasino.com/welcome for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. There are 3 important questions that parents of students should be asking themselves. Do you want to set your child up for success? Is your child ahead, not getting challenged enough in class? Or is this a big school year for your kid? Maybe starting kindergarten, middle school, or high school. IXL Learning is an online learning program for kids covering math, language arts, science, and social studies. IXL is designed to help them really understand and master topics in a fun way. Powered by advanced algorithms, IXL gives the right help to each kid, no matter the age or personality. There's one site for all the kids in your home, pre-K to 12th grade. Kids can use it at home on the computer or on the go through the app on your phone or tablet. No more grading those worksheets. IXL grades everything itself. And no more trying to figure out how to explain math equations or grammar rules yourself. IXL has built-in explanations videos. 1 in 4 students in the U.S. are learning with IXL. IXL is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts in the U.S. Tutoring is very important to all kids. 1, to catch up, or even to get ahead. And tutoring can be especially important during the summer months. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And True Crime Garage listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/garage. Visit IXL.com/garage to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price.
All right, we are back. Cheers, mates. Talk hands in the air.
Cheers to everyone. Cheers to the people in the back. Now, we're going to fast forward here a few months to late spring, early summer, when we are going to have a similar and equally bizarre situation. Again, this is in Saint Paul, Minnesota. So this will put us, Captain, at June 3rd, 1981. Interestingly, to me, both of those dates with our previous victim and on this date as well, both of these dates that we've discussed are Wednesdays. So Wednesday, July 3rd, 1981, we have 18-year-old Kimberly Compton. Now, she's from Pepin, Wisconsin, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. Now, a lot of the sources will say that Kimberly Compton was a student, but I know, Captain, that the young Kimberly Compton had just graduated high school and was not yet set up for further schooling. Instead, she had decided that it was time to go off and find a place of work for her. She had previously held a waitress job for a short period of time. She liked working and excelled at it. But because, as she put it, there was nothing for her in the very small town, actually the village of Pepin, population 890 people, she was going to take her talents to the big city, the Twin Cities, where she was sure to find a job. Her grandfather said that the youngster had proven to be a hard worker and proven to be fine at adapting to new surroundings, so that was no trouble. But what he worried about was that Kimberly was far too friendly. Kimberly's grandfather, Theodore Compton, said, quote, "I don't give a damn who it was. She'd stop and talk to them," end quote. Kimberly ventured off to Saint Paul, Minnesota in 1981, population over 270,000 people. So a very big difference from her small village in Wisconsin. Now, this poor girl just had stepped off of the bus to St. Paul when she has the terrible and unfortunate luck of crossing paths with the last person on that day in St. Paul that any young woman would want to find themselves in the company of. So Kimberly steps off of the bus, getting her into town. She rented a locker at the bus depot. She put some of her belongings in this locker, and then she walks across the street from the bus depot to a place called Mickey's Diner. She was looking to get something to eat after her journey. She's going to grab a bite to eat. This Mickey's Diner is legit, Captain. It's been there serving up good food since 1960, still around today. She sits down and orders that day's diner special. She gets her food, and during the course of enjoying her meal, a man approaches her table, and the dude seems friendly enough. He asks if he can sit down and chat with her. She's sitting alone. He sits down, and they start talking. She tells him she's very new to town. In fact, she had just arrived. The man offers to drive her around St. Paul to show her some of the city. Then, without any influence from the victim, other than this man's own sad madness, once they're out there driving around, he attacks her. So they're out by this spot on the river. He took her to a spot on the river. And she's sitting by the river, this spot where her new city guide chose, the friendly man from the diner, had just taken her to a minute or so prior. He starts stabbing her. He stabs her dozens of times. But apparently that was not enough for him. He ripped out the shoelace from poor Kimberly's shoe and then strangles her with it. She was killed right there by the river's edge just a few hours after getting off of the bus in St. Paul. This time, however, something must have been different because the attacker this time does not immediately call 911. Kim's body was discovered by a group of 3 teenage boys out walking in a wooded area north of Superior and Oneida Streets in St. Paul. They were the ones to report the body. Now, Captain, I apologize because I'm a little unclear as to the exact timing of this because it's not available in some of the reports. But sometime after this body was discovered by the teenagers or all around the same time, this is when a call comes into police. Right. So police are are at the same time being made aware of this body, this homicide, and they're responding. So having respond, they have a little bit of detailed information about the crime prior to receiving this call, even if it's just minutes. So several hours after this poor woman is attacked, and what would end up being a murder, several hours after this murder took place, but not long enough. We should be very clear. Not long enough that any of the information had been released to the public by the police. This is when police get a call from a male caller with a strangely high-pitched voice. The caller is crying and or attempting to disguise their voice. This is now the infamous call that is sometimes referred to as the "don't talk, just listen" call, as that was the statement that the dispatcher was met with when picking up the call. A description of this call, the short of it, Captain, is the caller tells the dispatcher, quote, "God damn, will you find me? I just stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing."
Well, and like you said, because this is a strange voice, this has to perk up law enforcement's ears, the dispatcher's ears, and go, this is very similar to a call that came in just a couple months ago.
There's some detail in that, right? There is a rather important detail offered up by the killer, or the caller, I should say, because at the time, after finding Kim's body, who was unidentified early in the investigation, they find this woman. They don't know who she is, and we'll get into that in a sec. But at the time, police knew that the unidentified victim, she had been stabbed 61 times with an unknown sharp instrument, plus the strangulation with the shoelace. See, detectives did not know that Kimberly was stabbed with an ice pick. They knew that she was stabbed with an unknown object, but because of the nature of the wounds, what they did know was that it was not a knife that was used. So the weirdo on the phone answered that question for the detectives. She was killed with an ice pick. And oh, by the way, as we said, the not knowing what she was stabbed with, that had not been released to the public yet either. The police actually thought that it was potentially a screwdriver that had done the damage to the victim. But as the killer himself had told them on the strange phone call, it was an ice pick. Now, this is a detail that I rather, let's try to walk away from some of the gory details that we just discussed, because this is a detail that I just enjoy finding in these stories. This is how the detectives learn the identity of the victim. So the victim is Kimberly Compton, but I love these little bloodhound gang type gumshoe detective work stories. So when they arrive on the scene, they have no idea who this victim is. And remember, we told the story of her just stepping off of the bus. So she's not even from the area. And when they find her, she has no identification on her. What police do find in one of her pockets is a key. And that key is to the locker that she rented at the bus depot. So they go to the bus depot, open up the locker, and inside they go through her belongings, finding her identification there, thus being able to identify our victim as 18-year-old Kimberly Compton. Now, the police know that the hysterical caller, this is not a hoax. This is not a coincidence. The fact that the caller provided valuable unknown information during the call would seem to tell you that this is very, very likely our killer, the attacker.
How long does it take for them to pick up that this might be the same caller as the previous attack?
That's a very great question here, because you would think that it wouldn't take long at all. Police did think that the calls were made by the same person, but they brought in like experts and they hired experts to come in and give their air quote expert opinion on the case, and the opinions kind of come out with like, yeah, we're pretty sure it's the same guy, but we can't say 100% it's the same guy, which is really the conclusion that the police had arrived at themselves. The other thing too, you're really looking from a law enforcement perspective, you are investigating the crime that's handed to you, right? So you're in this case, you are on the receiving end of a murder investigation. A homicide is the crime. In this case, Kimberly Compton. With Karen Potak, that's an assault / attempted murder. And it's very easy to look at them as one and the same, but also keep in mind that may go to a different detective. So I'm guessing, like in a lot of the cases that we've talked about, when you have a series of crimes, series of offenses, regardless if it's murder, rape, robberies, bank robberies, what have you, that you probably have a house divided amongst the police force, right? Where there's some that believe 100% it's one and the same, and then others that have their doubts. But the strange here is just going to keep getting weirder and stranger, because 2 days later, right? This is 2 days after the ice pick call. The caller with the same weird voice calls police once again. This time, he's calling to say he's sorry. Saying he's sorry for stabbing Kimberly Compton and that he would turn himself in, but he doesn't, regardless of what he says on this phone call. So this, to me, this moment here, right? This is a little bit of an aha moment, because you're trying to, you've talked about it already in the first part of today's show, trying to get into the mind of this attacker. Who is he? What is he up to? Why is he doing what he's doing? So this, to me, would seem indicative that this fella on the phone is following the case in the papers.
Well, again, if he's connected to the first attack, he's probably following the case and what happened to that victim, because she didn't die. So, well, my next victim, I can't use the same strategy, because I can't leave it to chance that this next victim will walk away and be able to identify me. So he changes his instrument of attack.
And this is 6 months later, right? Between the time of the first attack, the attempted murder, and then this actual homicide. But what I'm picking up on here in this second call regarding the Kimberly Compton case, this is call number 2 in this one single case, in the Kimberly Compton case. He has now choosing to use her name during this call. This making me believe that he is following the case on the news and or in the newspapers. Now knowing her name, he's using the name during this call, which he did not before in the previous call about Kimberly Compton, and he did not use the name of Karen when he called that one in. Now, of course, it's possible that through discussion that he knew Kimberly Compton's name during the course of talking over, her dinner at the diner and then riding around in his car.
Right.
But this, to me, it goes to the psyche of this attacker. And is he look, the calls themselves, to me, could insinuate that this guy is far beyond driven. He's completely off the rails, insane. The following of the news stories about his victim would suggest that there is some level of sanity for your attacker here. So then the very next day after call number 2 in the Kimberly Compton case, this son of a bitch calls again. This time calling to say that some of the details in the newspaper accounts were inaccurate. So now 100% confirmation that he is following the case in the news and on the newspapers. And then 5 days later, another call comes in. So now we're at June 11th. This call, they hear what law enforcement described as a whimpering, barely coherent voice that is crying and saying something like, "I'm sorry for what I did to Compton." Now, remember Kimberly's grandfather, with whom she had lived with just prior to her death, had said that he believed Kimberly's overly friendly nature may have helped and made her even more vulnerable, or a more vulnerable victim. But please keep in mind, she was only a victim because of this predator, this horrible waste of a human that would do such terrible things to a young woman. I mean, imagine a world without these types and how friendly we all would be, or we all would want to be. Kim's grandfather, Theodore Compton, added to his comments by saying, quote, "I can't for the life of me see why anyone would want to manipulate a girl like that. It had to be a regular maniac to do a job on her like that."
So much more to get to. Stick around for part 2. And until then,
Be good, be kind, and don't litter.
Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. With the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms, Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers. In fact, Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/podcast free. All lowercase, shopify.com/podcast free, shopify.com/podcast free.